He is a Zimbabwean human rights lawyer by profession and training, a Christian by religion and a politician who until recently held the position of Minister of Education, Sports, Arts and Culture under the MDC formation led by Welshman Mugabe within the unity government of Zimbabwe. This was from February 2003 to August 2013, and he's also the legal secretary of that party. Senator Coltart, welcome to SaharaTV.
Hello, Fungai. Good being with you again.
Good, good. Now, we know that obviously in the last year, the unity government dissolved and ZANU-PF is now in the ultimate controllers and leaders of Zimbabwe. How's the transition been with you?
Well, for me personally, it's been quite a nice break. I've been at this for 30 years and 13 years in Parliament, and going up to Harare every week from Bulawayo is very tiring. So it's been nice to have a bit of a break to catch up on myself, and also, of course, not to have the responsibility of trying to educate over 3 million children. Right. But I think as far as the country is concerned, the country is definitely in a bad way. There's this very uneasy atmosphere here. The economy is battling. And I think there are a lot of unresolved issues and people are nervous.
Okay, so we'll just go back to the elections because I know we spoke to you during the election time, and obviously you had also pointed out that there had been reports of rigging and stuff like that, but we're not going to waste much time. But how was it after the elections? Was there any proof that in actual fact there was some kind of rigging?
Well, I think if you think of rigging as some smoking gun, some huge evidence that points to rigging, we still will find it difficult to point to that smoking gun. But right. If rigging is perceived as a multifaceted, multi-layered process that took several weeks and months, then yes, definitely there was rigging, and yes, definitely there were very serious violations of the electoral law and the constitution itself. And certainly as we analyze some of these results, especially from rural areas, they're just unbelievable.
Right. Anyway, we know that Tsvangirai tried to take this to court, and apparently he lost that court case.
Well, that's right. He did start out a case to challenge the presidential result, but then when he couldn't get his hands on some of the electoral material, when he couldn't, for example, have the ballot boxes opened, he abandoned it. And there has been a bit of a farce around, for example, the voters' roll. In terms of our electoral act, the voters' roll was meant to be supplied in electronic format. In this digital age, you would think that that wouldn't be a problem. But the registrar of voters has turned around to say that because of technical problems, they have been unable to this day to provide us with a copy of the electronic voters roll. And that's silly, of course. How can computer problems in this day and age last 6 to 7 months? But I think if there's a smoking gun anywhere, it is in relation to the voters roll and what amounts to the refusal to hand over that electronic copy of the voters' roll, which I think will reveal just how they did manage to steal this election.
Well, okay, these are some of just Zimbabwe's problems. We know that the economy is tanking deeper and deeper. And at this point as we speak, the same government had promised to indigenize everything. Taking 51% of the mines and giving it to the locals, the nationals. So what do you think of their strategic planning in terms of this? Is this been part of what's affecting the economy as we speak?
I think that ZANU-PF was focused entirely on winning the election. They didn't really think about how they would govern the country after retaining power. And so they made a variety of promises. For example, to civil servants, they said that they would increase their salaries. They promised indigenization, that they would take over a wide variety of companies. They wrote off the electricity bills, the telephone bills, the rates that individuals owed local councils, cities, towns, and the like. And these were all populist measures designed to encourage people to vote for them. Well, they won the election. They now have to deal with the consequences of those policies. For example, in Bulawayo, the writing off of rates wrote off about $65 million due by citizens to the city of Bulawayo, which means that the Bulawayo City Council has really battled to provide services to its citizens. And the same has happened to the Power Authority, ZESA, and to a variety of other parastatals, government entities that supply electricity and provide phone services. Tied into that is the fact that the promise to indigenize led to a dramatic reduction in business confidence. There was a run on the banks. One bank reported $800 million being withdrawn from their coffers. A number of other banks are in trouble. And business confidence generally is very low.
Yeah, we've seen people actually rioting, trying to get money out of some banks. And there have been reports that some of these people that started the riots were part of the army because they'd gone to a bank, tried to withdraw some money, and only to be told there's a shortage of cash. So these are obviously some of the problems. But we're going to move on right ahead. We know that there's been speculation within the country. People have been asking, and a lot of media has jumped onto this issue, like, where is the president? We know that ZANU-PF has explained through the spokesperson, Charamba, that the president is out somewhere for vacation, and the vacation ends this end of January. But at the end of the day, there's also been media reports and even pictures of the president arriving at the airport, and it's been established that the picture, like the one I'm holding right now, is the same picture that was used as he arrived from the Africa Unity Summit in Ethiopia, and this was on January 28, 2013. And the one that they posted is the same one on January 11th, 2014. Why would you think that there's this secrecy? Because there's been speculation of him not being well.
Well, let me say this, that Robert Mugabe, for a number of years now, has taken January off as his month of leave. So there's nothing unusual in that. And for the last few years, he's also been traveling to Singapore during that leave. So once again, there's nothing unusual in that. There are two factors, of course. The one is that Mr. Mugabe turns 90 in February.
Right.
So he's an old man by anyone's reckoning. The second thing is this photograph that you referred to in the Herald. They used a photograph that was a year old.
Right.
And that was exposed pretty quickly. And there's been no explanation and no denial that about the photograph. And the public are left with this thing hanging in the air, that they've used a year-old photograph to pretend, seemingly to the public, that the president was hale and hearty and good health. And the silence is deafening now in the country. With their failure to explain.
Okay, we've also been following through and been receiving reports through various media, including the Herald itself, that there's been in-house squabbling. There's been a faction on the Maimujuru, the vice president, and also Emerson Mnangagwa trying to squabble for the leadership of the party and hopefully to be the president. So what do you think, in your own words, like would happen, or what is happening in that sense?
I've sat in cabinet for the last 4.5 years. Every week we met on Tuesday, so I got a first-hand look at the divisions within ZANU-PF. And it was always very apparent to me in cabinet that there was this division.
Right.
People would fall behind Joyce Majuro. The things that she would say would differ greatly from what Emmerson Mnangagwa felt. And of course, much of that has come into the open in the run-up to the ZANU-PF Congress in December. If you take a superficial look at that, it would appear as if Joyce Majuro won that battle. But much turns on the provisions within the Zimbabwe Constitution. One of the intriguing provisions that was introduced right at the 11th hour by ZANU-PF, or rather elements of ZANU-PF, amended the Constitution, which we had agreed, with an interim provision which says that in the event of the president who is elected in the first election after the bringing into law of the new constitution, namely Robert Mugabe, because he is now the first president elected in July. If he dies or resigns or is incapacitated, the vice president becomes president for a period of 90 days. But within 90 days, the party then selects who will be president. Okay. So it doesn't matter what Parliament thinks, what the provincial elections in ZANU-PF has resulted in. Clearly, in terms of the national constitution, the party, in this case ZANU-PF, gets an opportunity to select who will be president. And that's where this real battle is. It doesn't matter what has gone before. If Robert Mugabe, as I say, dies or becomes incapacitated, it is inevitably going to unleash
the vice president will step in, and after 90 days.
For only 90 days, but within the 90 days, the party is then given the power to determine who will be the president. And there's still not clarity in that regard.
Okay, so now let's talk about corruption. Zimbabwe has been rated actually the third African country after Nigeria and Egypt in the same position. And we know that Zimbabwe had diamonds, because now there are reports that those diamonds are no longer. And everybody wants to know what happened to the diamond money, because the Zimbabwean economy had never sustained itself to a point where, you know, people could be securely safe and feel confident that it was doing well. And then there's also been a report from the Deputy Minister of Mines, Fred Moyo, who said that a massive diamond deposits worth billions have been also discovered, and they're taking their time to carefully analyze these fields. So is there any truth in this? Is it factual? And what has been the case with corruption there?
Well, let's deal with the two issues. Firstly, diamonds. There's been such a cloud of secrecy around diamonds that no one outside of this inner circle really knows the true position regarding diamonds. We did have that very interesting statement made by the Minister of Mines in December, where he actually criticized some of the mining houses. And he pointed out that the alluvial deposits, the surface deposits, had almost been exhausted. But they said he said in that statement that there were non-alluvial deposits of diamonds. They think that there are some Kimberley pipes which can be exploited. And then we've had this recent statement from the Deputy Minister saying that there are other diamond fields. So you've got these various statements out there. The experts I speak to say that, yes, the alluvial diamond deposits are running out, but that Zimbabwe still has substantial pipes, but these are more difficult deposits to mine. And bear in mind that many of the companies which have been given the rights to mine the alluvial diamonds to date are not companies that have extensive experience in diamond mining. You know, the one company that was given the right was literally a scrap metal dealer, and then was given the right to mine diamonds. So the fear is that they don't have the necessary expertise, and what we're told is that they're now losing money, that what Zimbabwe needs are companies which have that experience and are going to make the necessary substantial investment to exploit these diamond fields. But in short, I think that Zimbabwe still has diamond deposits.
Right.
They're harder to mine. The cream has gone. Sadly, the nation has not benefited from the cream. It seems as if a few individuals have benefited greatly.
It's actually statements that people have been making that the army has been controlling these diamond fields, actually, because people have not been allowed to actually even come close to these mines. That's the fact, right?
Well, none of us know the facts,
right.
Because, as I say, there is such a cloud of secrecy around these diamonds. Those allegations have been made. I personally don't know the truth. All that we know is that there's been a lot of activity. You just have to go onto Google Earth and you can see the activity, the investment that has happened. We can see some of the proceeds. Some senior ZANU politicians have become enormously wealthy in the last 5 to 6 years. They've bought houses and businesses, throughout the country. And as a cabinet minister, I know exactly how much I earned. I've also been a lawyer for 30 years. I work hard. I pay my taxes, and it makes me question where, some of this wealth has suddenly appeared from.
Well, there have been reports actually of people getting beat up, people getting tortured, and dogs, the army being there present with dogs, and anybody wandering around that Marange area have actually been, abused. But anyway, we'll move on. Now, there's been this story about, foreign companies or foreign individuals owning businesses around Zimbabwe. They were given a time to leave, otherwise they would get deported or locked up and their businesses handed over to locals. Has that process started, that operation?
There's no evidence of that having happened. And once again, this comes back to ZANU rhetoric. It's tied in, it's a similar policy to the indigenization policy. People are battling, Zimbabweans are battling. We have high unemployment rates. There is a vast gulf between rich and poor. If you travel around the northern suburbs of Harare, you see mansions that you don't even see in Washington and New York. They are so large, and yet in the same city, there is enormous poverty. And so poor people in Zimbabwe can see this gulf, understand the great difficulties that they have, and there is rising anger. And so one of the ways that ZANU-PF responds to this is to introduce diversions, to say, well, we'll take over some of these mines and we'll kick out these Chinese or Nigerians and take over their businesses. But we don't actually see that happening on the ground because, of course, many of those people who've come in are well connected and are protected. Not that I actually support that type of arbitrary action. I think that we need to become a country which abides by the rule of law.
Right.
And we can't just kick people out willy-nilly without allowing them due process of law to protect whatever investment they have made in the country.
Right. Now, we know that there's the Wikipedia of Zimbabwe, actually, that's what they call him. His name is Baba Jukwa. Nobody knows his identity, but Baba Jukwa's kind of like sprout up from nowhere. And this was just before the elections last year, and he obviously took over the social media, and he's been giving out statements, and the government has obviously offered some ransom money for anybody who knows how to identify this character. And some of the stuff he's been saying have been deemed true, almost prophetic to a point. What is your feeling about this guy, and who might he be in your own...
I haven't got a clue who he is. In fact, I think that there's probably no such individual. I suspect that it's a group of people, possibly people who are not even in the country. You know, such is the nature of Facebook and Twitter and other forms of social media, that you can run a Facebook account seemingly out of Zimbabwe, but you might be based in Johannesburg or London or Lusaka, for that matter.
Right.
I tend to feel that Baba Jukwa is a repository of intelligence that comes in, and they then put these stories out. They clearly, because of its controversial nature, and you can see from the inbox that people send into this Facebook site a lot of intelligence, and some of it is true, some of it isn't. You know, they have been wrong on some issues, but I think that it's just an illustration of the problems that the internet and social media present ZANU-PF. I think that the hardliners within ZANU-PF would love to have a Chinese type of control applied, where you can't access Twitter or Facebook, and people, you know, can't read about these salacious events taking place in our country. But I think that ZANU-PF are going to find it very difficult now to put the lid on this.
Okay. Anyway, just one last word before we close. Thank you very much for joining us on our program. So basically, how can you summarize the life in Zimbabwe from how you've experienced it within the government and now as a regular person outside government? Where is Zimbabwe headed to?
Zimbabwe definitely is at a crossroads. It is in a crisis at present. ZANU-PF wrested power, but now they're not quite sure what to do with it. I think that they face two major challenges in the short term. The first is the unraveling economic situation, where because of the decline in business confidence, tax receipts are going down, and yet expectations are very high, and they're going to battle to meet those expectations. And then the second problem that they face is the internal problem of Robert Mugabe's age, and of course his health. If these stories are correct, and even if they aren't correct, the fact of the matter is that he's 90. He has reduced capacity, and these problems within ZANU-PF are definitely unresolved. These two factors combined mean that there is a growing crisis, an economic and a political crisis in Zimbabwe, which almost inevitably has to come to a head. The question in my mind is whether those opposed to ZANU-PF have the capacity to reunite and provide a viable alternative. The other question I have is whether the more pragmatic and moderate voices within ZANU-PF manage to hold sway and retain control of ZANU-PF, because there's no doubt that in people like Joyce Mujuru, there's a relatively sane voice and head there who would negotiate with many others who wouldn't necessarily resort to coercion to remain in power. But I think that, in conclusion, these pressures are building in society, and I think that they will probably come to a head in the course of this year.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was obviously Honorable David Coltart, former Minister of Education, Sports and Arts and Culture in the Unity Government in Zimbabwe. Thank you very much for joining us. He was joining us via Skype from his home in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe. Fungai Maboreke, SaharaTV. Stay tuned. Sahara from the people.